Manager kept telling me to wait for feedback and new tasks. Now I'm paid to do nothing while the team falls apart. I've been with this massive company, over 10,000 employees, for about 4 years now. Last year, I made a huge move, switching countries, switching departments, and getting myself a new contract for fully remote work. The company itself was great, and I actually loved my old role. I was challenged every day, learned a ton, and genuinely enjoyed the work. But when it became clear my old position didn't have a contractual path for remote work, I shifted to a different department that could accommodate my new circumstances. That's how I found myself in a tiny team, just 4 people, counting the manager. When I joined, the place was pure chaos, tasks everywhere, priorities unclear, everything scattered. So, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I started organizing the madness into a structure everyone could follow, built a workable roadmap, and laid down strategies to actually get some of these open tasks and endless requests finished. My new manager wasn't much help, to be honest. He was pretty much useless, but at least he let me do my thing. But, as always, there were obstacles. Certain requests and changes needed higher approval and had to run up the chain through my manager. Every time I'd flag something for approval or just basic feedback, it would all go into a black hole, no matter how many times I brought it up in 1-1s or team meetings. Everything was stuck in limbo. Still, I powered through the tasks I could and offered my help to other teams. Then, the manager got himself promoted after just 3 months of me being there. His replacement, my new manager, took over a few months later, reporting directly to my old manager. By then, I was mainly working alongside other teams, since all my core tasks were waiting for someone, anyone, to approve them, and no new work was getting handed out. I've always tried to be chill when onboarding someone new, making sure they have room to absorb everything and time to get their bearings, especially in this complicated environment. Another 3 months went by, and it was clear to me what kind of manager I'd ended up with. I eventually gave up trying to explain how complex things actually were, or what was needed to get any kind of result. 9 months in, I'd onboarded the new manager, completed every task that I could complete, and was doing my best to help my colleagues keep the lights on. Other teams didn't always need my help, so during most of my new manager's onboarding, things got seriously idle. Time and again, I told my manager that I had nothing left to do unless we got some approvals on open tasks or new things got assigned. I just kept asking, if anything was really urgent, please, escalate it. 2 months ago, my new manager snapped during a meeting, told me to stop asking for task approvals and just wait for feedback. That was enough for me. I sent a follow-up email for clarity and got a written answer, just wait for feedback or new tasks. So that's exactly what I do now. Nothing. Week after week, I show up for the team meeting with 0 updates. Not only have I stopped helping other teams, since that now requires the manager's approval, and every request gets shot down, but I keep everything documented, all my evidence stored in a shared team space, with my own copy tucked away and updated whenever something new comes up. One team member quit last month, and the other is already searching for a way out. There's a good 20-year age gap between me and the other 2 team members. They're still building experience, while our new manager is in his early 60s and probably close to retirement. Yesterday, we found ourselves in an impromptu team meeting, except it was just us, no manager. We ended up laughing about the utter absurdity of the situation, even if it was tinged with frustration that we couldn't actually use our skills for something meaningful. As for me, I've decided I'm riding this wave to see where it goes. After all, who would pass up getting paid to do absolutely nothing? Update 1. Very little actual work has been finished over the past year. Despite our weekly meetings, nothing ever came out of them. No concrete feedback, no real approvals. I didn't stray beyond my official job description, simply staying the course, strictly compliant, and patiently waiting for guidance that never arrived. I stopped offering proactive ideas, shelved creative concepts, and took nearly 0 initiative beyond the occasional clarifying question. Every time I reached out for direction, my questions were promptly redirected to my manager, then left in limbo. One by one, the team shrank. My last remaining colleague mirrored this approach, but with less subtlety. Eventually, he was let go. After he was gone, I inherited some of his tasks, but I kept my same approach. Every ambiguity was tossed back for clarification and progress froze until proper feedback landed, though it rarely ever did. A few months later, a new hire joined. I watched his onboarding from a safe distance, and to call the process chaotic would be an absurd understatement. No structure, no documentation, basically 0 support. Watching him struggle through that mess showed me just how deeply rooted the dysfunction really was. At some point, what little process remained became even more rigid. Now, I couldn't even send a simple email to upper management without permission. Every basic update required prior approval, further grinding communication and progress to a halt. Today, the inevitable next chapter arrived. Management announced it was time for yet another restructuring. My manager was fired. No replacement named, no new direction, just me and the new guy, both of us clueless about what happens next. I suppose I'll continue to do what I now do best. Waiting for feedback. At this point, the future is one giant question mark. With no leadership, no updated responsibilities, and no word from above, we're just parked in neutral. Nobody is assigning new objectives, nobody's telling us what to expect. There's a twisted, quiet irony here. The culture of waiting for feedback, needing permission for every tiny step, has now paralyzed the department. Leadership manufactured the bottleneck, then yanked out the only person technically allowed to open the valve. So here I am, alongside my lone colleague, minimal instructions, zero feedback. It's business as usual, follow orders to the letter and, when told to wait for feedback, do exactly that. No extra work. No ideas. No initiative. After my teammate was cut, I took over some of his stuff, but I dragged my feet and waited for approvals at every turn. When the replacement joined, his onboarding was a zoo. Even sending a routine email up the chain took approval. And today, after another shake-up, my manager's gone, and we're left with absolute silence. No word, no direction, just more waiting. I even tried reaching out to the new director, but he only just joined a few weeks ago himself. He has no plan, no vision, just a handful of vague promises and a lot of silence. I guess he's going to take his sweet time finding a solution, if one ever comes at all. My work life has become a study in inertia, following orders, waiting for feedback, and watching as one bottleneck after another brings every task to a standstill. Business as usual, just quieter than ever. I should probably mention how I ended up here, since not too long ago, I was basically an OI rookie in the EU, thankfully convinced to take the plunge into this alternative way of working. Thanks to some ruthless corporate politics and a manager who thought leadership meant ghosting their own team, I was an expert in collecting dust. Taking my cues from colleagues, I realized that doing OI in Europe is a whole different beast, mostly because our labor laws actually give a damn about sanity. 80-hour weeks? Not really a thing here. I dove into every bit of legal info I could get my hands on, basically living like a part-time employment lawyer for a stretch. My biggest concern was making sure my first job would let me work elsewhere, and once I got that official approval, it was game on. Finding a second job took time. I was picky, wanted remote, flexible, no micromanaging, no wild KPIs. I needed something similar to my current role, but in a different industry for safety. Months of ninja-level job hunting later, I found it, and even got a contract clause specifically letting me work for other employers as long as it wasn't in the same industry. On my first day at J2, I took the day off from J1, panicking internally about juggling two streams of notifications. The onboarding was intense, but it showed me how to structure my day to keep my sanity and still deliver results. In hindsight, I probably should have taken a few extra days off from J1, would have made easing into OI a lot smoother. My setup wasn't fancy, just two company laptops, one monitor, keyboard, mouse, and a trusty Bluetooth headset. Forget docking stations or KVM switches, I stuck with manual labor. When it was time for J1, I'd plug that laptop in, enter full corporate mode. If J2 needed me instead, I swapped connections and switched the headset. 5 seconds and I was elsewhere, all while keeping up the illusion for anyone watching. It's not high tech, it's not pretty, but it works. And in this place, that's really all that matters. Sometimes I feel like a digital DJ, seamlessly switching between sets, curating the ultimate illusion of being everywhere at once, even when I'm not. In the world of overemployment, that's the real skill, convincing everyone I'm perpetually available while actually hiding in plain sight. I've seen a million strategies floating around, but here's what's been working for me. Luckily, I had an old phone tucked away in a drawer, while J1 kindly supplied a work phone. Now, each job gets its own device. Each phone is logged into its own set of apps, Teams, Outlook, all the usual corporate surveillance suspects, but never the same services across both. No crossover, not even by accident. To maintain my presence, I keep both phone screens set to never lock. The moment that green dot goes yellow on Teams, the questions start rolling in. Teams is always open and humming along on both phones, quietly nestled in the background, so I never miss a beat. On my main computer, I've mastered an old trick. I open a random PowerPoint deck, launch presentation mode, and then immediately minimize it. That sneaky move keeps my team status alive and green while I'm off tackling actual work, or, let's be honest, making coffee for the 5th time in an hour. My calendar? It's a fortified masterpiece. I stack it with strategic blockers, so my team status flips to red exactly when I want to disappear for a breather. Between two buzzing phones, a zombie PowerPoint standing guard, and a calendar full of battle-hardened blockers, I've reached a state of constant digital presence. Even when my mind's wandering in another dimension, everyone still sees that reassuring green dot. Funny thing is, I've never felt this productive while getting away with doing so little. The hardest lesson, resisting the urge to speedrun through my work. I've had to force myself to slow down, spread out the deliverables, and keep my workload under strict control. Things were rolling along until J1 finally snapped out of hibernation and decided to pummel me with random meetings that should have just been emails, or deleted altogether. Every afternoon before shutting down my battle stations, both laptops, I block out my calendar for the next day and schedule a cascade of emails to fire off at perfectly timed intervals. It's just enough digital activity to look impressively productive. When that first double paycheck dropped, pure dopamine surge. Worth every awkward calendar shuffle and fleeting identity crisis. I've found my groove now, sailed through my first, positive, performance reviews, and I genuinely think I can ride this rhythm, At least until the workload blows up or someone catches on. About the whole LinkedIn dilemma, I don't really bother. I hibernated my profile the moment I signed my contracts. If anyone ever asks, I simply play it off as being one of those people who avoids most social platforms except for entertainment. Worst case? I'd whip up a fresh profile using a pretend middle name without a second thought. For now, I'm just soaking it all in, riding that double-paid dopamine high, for as long as I can. Update 2. I logged in from J1 on one screen while babysitting a J2 stand-up on the other, the digital equivalent of juggling knives. 10 minutes in, a finance guy with a CFO title fragment asked for outcomes by quarter. My new director tried to cough up some generic noise about transition and restructuring alignment until someone asked where the deliverables were. I pasted the link to the shared documentation and the written instruction telling me to wait for feedback right into the chat. That link traveled through the room like a virus. You could hear the call go flat. 5 minutes of dead air, a couple of sighs, then finance asked who had the authority matrix for approvals. Nobody did. Meeting ended with a promise for rapid remediation. Translation: panic. An hour later, my old manager, the one who got promoted, pinged me with a classic quick call? And a smiley. I ignored it. I waited for something official. What came instead was a formal request from legal to provide timelines and decision blocks for all stalled work. I dropped a neat little package of dates, threads, and the email where I was instructed to stop asking and just wait. Legal replied with a thank you and a vague appreciate your diligence. 10 minutes after that, my calendar exploded. I got a temporary scope letter. For 30 days, I had sign off on a narrow band of approvals in our area. No title change, no extra money, but enough to unstick the obvious stuff. So I did exactly that. I moved 3 approvals that had been aging like fine cheese. Sent the approvals, notified the teams, then went straight back to the edges of my sandbox. Partner teams started popping up in the chat with finally. And bless you, and I smiled, because corporate amnesia was already rewriting me as both the clog and the plumber depending on who was talking. The next morning, the new hire resigned. He'd been quiet for weeks, and I can't blame him. HR booked a goodbye copy-paste call, nobody showed except me and a dead-air ringtone. He thanked me for being the only person to give him context, then bounced. I took 1 hour to move his access to archive status per policy and wrote the handover doc to myself. The director replied with a thumbs-up reaction. That was the entire plan. By midweek, the old manager disappeared from the org chart. Not fired, reassigned. Sideways. The kind of move that comes with a story about strategic priorities that convinces nobody. Somewhere in there, someone had read the chain and realized approving nothing for a year and enforcing a no contact without permission rule was not a leadership style. A director I'd never met asked me for a root cause analysis. I sent 8 bullet points dressed in full sentences and a single sentence header. We built a culture where the only way to be safe was to do nothing. He replied understood and invited me to a task force. I declined and said I'd need a revised job description and an authority matrix. He thanked me for my clarity and set up another meeting to align. I skipped the pep rally and stuck to the letter of what I'd been given. J2, meanwhile, decided to do a product launch with the grace of a falling fridge. My inbox there turned into a roulette wheel. I doubled down on my calendar robots. Scheduled status emails in J1 so I looked present while I was actually herding tickets in J2. Almost tripped when I dragged a J2 slide into the J1 chat, caught it on the preview thumbnail, and saved it by posting a generic template instead. Heart rate, cardio level. I rewarded myself by making another coffee and watching 2 green dots glow like little lies. Then HR rolled through with a surprise RTO announcement. 2 days a week for collaboration cadence. My contract is fully remote. Cue the avalanche of confused emails. I screenshot my clause, politely asked for clarification, and got an exemption in writing within an hour. Everyone else got to argue about commute stipends and desk hoteling. I stayed exactly where I was, which is to say, in my chair, at home, waiting for feedback. Finance forced one more change. Our cost center got flagged as low productivity risk, so they tried to sunset us into another org. Paperwork went haywire. For 24 hours, payroll showed my position as to be eliminated in the RIS. I didn't panic. I saved the screen, put it in my personal archive, and asked if my temporary approval scope still applied. It did. 30 minutes later, my director shuffled me to a different cost center with a generic title that could mean anything or nothing. My paycheck hit on schedule. The system caught up a day later, quietly rewriting history like nothing happened. With the approvals unlocked, the backlog moved. Not fast, on purpose, but enough to make noise. I approved what I could, pushed the ambiguous parts back to the approver queue, and watched people discover the thrill of reading their own policies for the first time. Twice I was asked to just use my judgment. I pasted the scope letter. I asked for it in writing. Silence followed, like it always does when someone wants you to break your own rules for their convenience. 2 days ago, the new director tried to knight me as acting lead. No money, no headcount, but all the accountability if it went wrong. I smiled through the monitor and told him I'd be happy to if HR updated my contract and the authority matrix reflected reality. He asked me to trust the process. I told him I was. I'm waiting for feedback. J2 gave me a raise. Small, but clean and immediate. I celebrated by buying a second charger so I can swap laptops without crawling under the desk. I know, living dangerously. I also switched to a dumb HDMI switch to kill the 5 seconds of plugging. The only truly exciting tech in my life is a $19 rectangle that lets me disappear from one universe and appear in another without yanking a cable. Yesterday, a VP from another region booked 15 minutes and showed up with a real question. If I give you the authority and leave you alone, can you clear the rest of this? I told him yes, but only if he sent it on paper and I got to decide the order. He said he'd send the note after his flight. He hasn't. My calendar shows a placeholder titled decision. The time passed. The event remains. I took a screenshot, filed it. Today, I moved one more approval, answered 2 precise questions with timestamps, and closed my laptop at 5:30 local time. My green dot stayed green. My inbox is hummed. Somewhere, people are building another deck about why nothing moved last year and why everything suddenly twitched this week. I'll be in the footnotes as evidence that compliance works and also as proof that compliance kills momentum. Both are true, depending on who's talking. It feels like the brink of something. Either they hand me the keys and the responsibility that goes with them, or they decide this ghost department has done enough slow motion damage and fold us into something with actual oxygen. I'm ready for either. Until then, you already know the plan. I'll be here, approving only what's mine to approve, keeping the receipts, and doing what I've become weirdly good at in this company. Update 3. Monday started with a subject line that felt like a prank: regulatory review prep, board risk, committee. 90 minutes later I was in a war room that looked like a family reunion of every acronym in the company. Audit, legal, DPO, finance, security, a director I'd never seen before, plus 3 people with strategy in their title and no last name showing. The new director tried to sell momentum. Audit asked for evidence. I shared my screen, opened the shared doc, scrolled to the instruction telling me to stop asking for approvals and wait for feedback, and didn't say a word. You could hear the oxygen leave the call. Legal asked who owned the authority matrix. Nobody moved. The DPO asked when the last data retention decision in our area had been signed. I said the date out loud. It was last year. Silence again, then please stay after. The after call was the real meeting. The DPO had a live ZER clock running, 30 days expiring in 68 hours, and my area was part of the trail. The original deletion request had been parked under needs approval. The DPO told me, in writing, to execute a very narrow set of actions and document my steps. Countersigned by legal. It took 45 minutes to do what had been aging for 11 months. I wrote a 1-page timeline, pasted the email, attached the completion logs. The DPO sent a thank you that CC'd 3 VPs and a sentence that ended with "We need this level of clarity everywhere." Finance replied with a thumbs up emoji and a spreadsheet nobody opened. By lunch, the VP from another region finally delivered the thing he'd promised: a delegation of authority note with my name on it, time boxed for 60 days, scoped across our stack, signed by him and legal. No title change, no stipend, no backslaps. Enough to pull nails out of wood. I asked for one more thing: a place to record decisions with names attached. He said yes as long as it didn't slow anything down. I made the decision register and told every requester they'd need to click a box acknowledging risk and priority. The people who'd been yelling for speed suddenly became very polite. Amazing what happens when their name goes on the line. I cleared 6 approvals in 2 days and parked 9 more with clarified questions that required actual answers. Partner teams spun up like they'd been waiting at a starting gun. A product owner sent "marry me" in a reaction. I smiled at my monitor and went back to my lane. Twice, a manager asked if I could just bless something outside the scope. I pasted the letter. I asked for it in writing. The requests vanished. Midweek, HR's system had a sense of humor. I got a calendar invite for an exit interview. Wrong department, wrong name, my ID on the call. I joined anyway. The HRBP appeared 60 seconds late and asked me how I was feeling about transitioning out. I told her I wasn't, and shared the screenshot from last month when payroll labeled me to be eliminated for 24 hours. She went pale, then professional, and asked for 15 minutes. 15 turned into 48 hours and a formal letter from HR confirming my role, my cost center, my remote exemption, and a note about a retention scheme under consideration. I thanked them and filed it. The calendar invite still shows as declined. I took a picture of that too. J2 decided to light a small fire. Weekend deployment, 3 time zones, and 1 vendor that thinks SLA is a suggestion. I blocked J1's calendar with compliance review for Monday morning and babysat a cutover from my kitchen counter with an HDMI switch and a coffee grinder. My green dot stayed green. I used the foot pedal I bought on a whim to mute before the vendor said something I'd end up quoting in an escalation. The rollout was messy, then stable. I scheduled a Monday email in J1 that read like I'd spent the weekend reading policies. Technically not a lie. Sunday night, a client in J1's world delivered a letter that had actual teeth. Termination threat, date on it, revenue line that makes finance breathe shallow. Someone forwarded it up and forgot to strip the "for the love of God fix this" comment. By 8 a.m., I was in a call with more executives than slides. The CFO asked who could sign. The director pointed to me. I pointed to the letter and read the scope. The CFO asked if I could approve the 2 specific items in the client's list. I said yes, if I got a 1-line email from an officer instructing me to do so and accepting the sequencing and risk path. The CEO typed a sentence that did exactly that. It was the most useful thing anyone had sent all month. I approved within the hour, notified the client, updated the register, and went back to quiet. The client walked the termination back to monitoring. The CFO asked for a dashboard. I sent a link to the doc I'd been using since winter. He asked who built it. I said I did, slowly. The new director tried again with the acting lead tap. This time he came armed with a draft JD and a story about headcount coming post-quarter. No money now, lots of responsibility now. I told him I'd be happy to review after HR pushed a contract amendment and the authority matrix named me for what he wanted me to own. He said we can't slow down, and I said I haven't. He booked a comp conversation and invited HR. HR declined and asked for a ticket. I closed my laptop at 6 and went to make dinner. Somewhere in the gaps, the org decided to fold us into the one team in the company that actually ships things. A head of something or other sent a welcome message that didn't mention me by name but did mention that process discipline was going to be a priority. I received a DocuSign with a new generic title, Program Something, same base pay, a one-time bonus that wouldn't buy a bike, and a paragraph that cemented my remote status like concrete. Tacked onto the end was an addendum: the delegation I've been using would become permanent for my area and renewable for adjacent work as needed. Legal was CC'd. My cursor hovered over sign. I didn't click. I replied with a single sentence asking for the decision register to be added as an official artifact, and for my authority to include the right to send status updates without pre-approval. 5 minutes later, legal replied approved. The doc updated. I signed. The system chimed. My inbox stayed completely ordinary. By Friday, the backlog graph looked like a staircase in reverse. People started writing sentences like per the register as if it had always existed. The DPO sent me a note saying our DSR was closed with no further action. Finance asked if we could pull 3 approvals forward to hit a quarter number. I sent them the current queue and told them to have the owners move their risk boxes to green. 2 did. 1 didn't. The forecast went from optimistic to slightly less optimistic. The world kept turning. I'm not a hero. I'm a person who asks for it in writing and then does exactly what the writing says. The company is now very into writing. My green dots glow. My HDMI rectangle continues to be the fanciest thing I own. J2 dropped another small raise for the extra weekend support, so I bought a second foot pedal. 1 for each universe. Not because I need them. Because I can. The calendar holds a quarterly business review with people who used to ignore my emails and now write circling back without irony. There's also a meeting titled Career Pathing that smells like they want to keep me in the chair without letting me touch the steering wheel. I have a folder full of receipts and a contract that finally says what I actually do. If they want more, they can put it on paper. Update 4. The prep turned into the real thing. Board Risk Committee, cameras on, everyone in their best neutral voice. They asked why nothing moved for a year. I showed them the sentence telling me to stop asking for approvals and wait for feedback, then opened the decision register and scrolled through names and dates like a museum tour. A board member asked what I needed to keep this from happening again. I said documented authority, a single place where decisions live with owners attached, and permission to communicate status without pre-approval. Nobody argued. Legal nodded like they'd been trying to say that for a decade. Someone from audit said this should have existed. I said it does now. The CFO asked if the backlog could be cleared by quarter close. I said yes if the owners clicked their risk box and accepted sequencing. He said we'll socialize. I said I'll wait for the clicks. I didn't have to wait long. The clicks arrived like popcorn at first, then a fusillade. People got brave when they realized their names were going next to decisions anyway, brave or very careful. Overnight, the register became a skyline of green and yellow. The ones who tried to push a decision without owning it died on the vine. I moved the approvals inside my fence and parked the rest with questions that read like subpoenas. 2 items came wrapped in urgent with a hint to backdate. I replied that I'd be happy to if they sent me a written instruction that included the original decision date and the authorizing officer. Silence. Legal DM'd me 3 hours later with a sentence that started with thank and ended with don't. Then we got a legal hold that crashed into a deletion request like 2 trains sharing a track. The DPO's team sent the hold, I acknowledged, and froze exactly what the letter told me to freeze. A product manager tried to bulldoze anyway, waving a client name and a revenue number. I pasted the hold. He asked if I could quietly proceed. I pasted the hold again. He escalated. Legal clipped the thread with a do not proceed. I logged the near miss in the register and went back to my lane. The DPO thanked me and CC'd the same VPs as last time. The subject line had mitigated in it this time. J2 decided to stack its quarterly review on top of J1's board fallout like a dare. I let my calendar robots do their thing. I ran J2's rehearsal with 1 foot on a pedal and J1's per the register walkthrough on the other monitor. I almost dropped a J2 burn down chart into J1's meeting and caught it on the thumbnail again. I rewarded myself by buying a second HDMI rectangle so I could pretend it was all intentional. Midweek, the system tried to erase me again. A headcount spreadsheet leaked into a channel it shouldn't have, a tab labeled rationalization with my ID flagged as redundant post-integration. I didn't panic. I saved it, opened a ticket, and attached my contract addendum and the permanent delegation. HR called it a draft scenario, promised to lock down the sheet, and sent a fresh letter reaffirming my role and remote status. I replied asking for an exclusion note tied to presence metrics, since I wasn't going to spend the next quarter gaming green dots to appease a dashboard. HR said presence wasn't a performance metric. I sent them a screenshot of a manager bragging about their team's presence score. HR updated the policy page within the hour and added a line about outcomes over indicators. I printed it to PDF and filed it next to the leak. The old manager, the one who rode the elevator up while everything stalled, pinged me from his new sideways title with a quick sync and a wink emoji. I replied asking for the agenda and the outcome he needed in writing. He sent a calendar block with nothing in it. I declined and linked the register. He went quiet. Later, I saw his name pop up as the risk owner on one of the items he used to sit on. He clicked green. Progress, in its way. Finance circled back on their quarter math. They wanted 3 approvals rushed. I sent them the queue with the risk owners' names and told them to ask the owners to move their boxes. 2 did. 1 didn't. Finance asked me to influence. I sent a polite note with an explanation of the dependency chain and a line about time not being a control. They replied with a smiley and a different spreadsheet. I approved what was mine and let the rest sit in the light where it belongs. The new org that adopted us decided to make process discipline an actual thing. They asked me to present the register to a room full of people who ship. 10 minutes later it was less a presentation and more a surgical consult. They wanted the template, the patterns, the sentences that make people stop nodding and pick up a pen. I gave them the template and the sentences. They put my name on a working group invite like I belonged there. I joined, then asked for clarity on scope and time commitment so J1 didn't try to make me secretly full-time in 3 places. They sent a line that said 2 hours a week and no managerial duties. I clicked accept. 2 hours later I had a message from someone I respect that said this is the first useful register I've seen in 5 years. I saved it in the folder I go to when my eyes glaze over in meetings. The comp conversation finally happened. HR came with a range, the director came with a speech, and I came with my receipts. I laid out what I was doing against the job they wanted me to have without the title. I asked for a contract amendment that matched the work, title updated, pay adjusted, authority matrix in sync. The director tried the post-quarter story again. I said I could wait, with the current scope, with the current speed, doing exactly what the paper says. HR blinked first. They offered a market adjustment now and a title change after headcount unlocks, both on paper. Not the moon. More than a bike. I accepted, signed the amendment, and added a new line to the decision register titled comp alignment. It felt petty and absolutely correct. J2, in a rare moment of corporate timing, sent me a conversion note for a promotion that was cleaner and faster than any conversation I've had at J1. It came with responsibility and money at the same time, like a matched set. I signed it from my kitchen counter and laughed at how surreal it felt to get rewarded for doing work on one side while being begged to take the wheel for free on the other. I ordered a 3rd-foot pedal because I could. A client in J1's world asked for a compliance attestation and samples. Audit wanted 25. I sent 27, all recent, all with names, timestamps, and attached emails. The auditor asked who designed the process. I said we formalized it as a team. He asked how long it took. I said not long, once people were allowed to decide. He smiled without moving his face and said we'll note the control effectiveness. The report landed 2 days later with a neat little line about remediation completed and sustained. Nobody high-fived. The CFO did send a 1-line email that said good work. I replied per the register. The only truly chaotic moment was an email from a partner vendor who decided self-approve and notify later was still a strategy. They shipped without sign-off and then tried to stuff the evidence into my queue like we'd agreed. I declined the record and asked for a rollback or a formal exception. They tried to escalate. The VP who gave me the delegation forwarded my reply with see below and a sentence that amounted to pick one, roll back or own it. The partner chose to own it. Their name sits on a yellow box in the register now, a small caution sign others can't miss. Somewhere in there, a seed of normalcy started to sprout. People stopped begging and started preparing. Risk boxes turned green because owners actually made decisions. The register became a page people kept open, not a thing they joked about. My inbox stayed ordinary in the way that tells you something is working. The quarterly business review happened. The deck featured my staircase and reverse chart without my name, and the director mispronounced discipline as discipline on the first slide. I smiled and drank my coffee and took the win. I still have the same chair. The green dots still glow. The HDMI rectangles are still the fanciest thing I own. When they want more, I ask for it on paper. When they send the paper, I do exactly what it says. And when I close the lid at the end of the day, both universes keep humming, which is exactly the speed I plan to maintain until someone tries to make me go faster without signing for it.